adoption requires dedicated time and effort and multiple iterations. It comes with its own set of challenges. For example, to test this observability, or there are hallucinations, right? You need to put right guardrails in place. You need to ensure that your prompts are, or your LLMs are giving you the output, because if you change an LLM, it may or may not give you the same accuracy or same kind of results that you're looking for. Having the test-driven development mindset is also important. So I think those are the things that customers are learning the hard way, right? There is this S-curve, right? There is a hype curve, and then there is realization that yes, there is technology, it's going to solve our problems, but it does require some due diligence. So those are some of the learning that I'm seeing customers now figure out as they mature in this journey, adopting Gen.
Welcome to Alexa's Input AI, the podcast where we decode the fast-moving world of artificial intelligence, digital transformation, and cloud-native innovation. I'm your host, Alexa Griffith, and today I'm excited to welcome Swagat Kulkarni, a seasoned architect and thought leader in digital transformation, agentic AI, and cloud technologies. Swagat brings over a decade of experience in helping large-scale enterprises navigate the dynamic technology landscape, translating complex business needs into scalable, future-ready solutions. So he's currently a senior solutions architect at Amazon Web Services, AWS, and Swagat has been guiding organizations through cloud-native adoption, agentic AI use cases, and modern architectural best practices. So before AWS, he led digital initiatives at Publicis Sapient, Cognizant, and Professional Access. He drove innovations in e-commerce, microservices, and headless architectures. So in this episode, some things we'll explore are how he approaches the design architectures that balance innovation with resilience, the rise of agentic AI, what it means for enterprises looking to adopt intelligent systems, and some lessons learned from shaping cloud-native commerce and enterprise transformation at scale. So if you're curious about how to blend technical vision, AI innovation, and enterprise reality, this conversation will give you both the inspiration and those actionable insights. So Swagat Kulkarni, welcome to Alexa's Input AI. Let's get into it.
Yeah, thank you, Alexa. Looking forward to this.
So you have an interesting path. Tell me a little bit more about how you came to be where you are today.
Yeah, sure. I think my journey started as a fresh graduate from college. I started my career working as a software engineer at a large system integrator back in India. And at the time, I was primarily focused on customers in retail and e-commerce verticals. Gained experience in building large-scale distributed system for some of the big brands in this space, such as Nordstrom, Gap, and Walmart. After a while, I slowly shifted my role from building to advising and helping large enterprise customers adopt the architecture at scale, and really leading larger teams across different geos and verticals. So move from engineering to consulting, if you will. And then also moving from just focusing on technology to some of the core components of large enterprises like data strategy, how digital transformation helps enterprises move at a faster innovation. Those were some of the areas that I started focusing on. And now I'm working at AWS as a solutions architect. And I think all the skills that I've acquired over a period of time really helps me in this role as well.
Nice. So what exactly do you do at AWS? Like, what's your day-to-day? What kind of problems are you solving?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my role at AWS is of a solutions architect. So at a face of it, it sounds very technical. Obviously, the role involves me working with my customers and building architecture designs in cloud at scale. Making sure that they are resilient, scalable, and following some of the best practices that we want our customers to adopt. But we also call ourselves, as field CTOs. It's a bit of a glorified term, but the idea here is we want to operate as a trusted advisor and a strategic advisor for our customers, and we are encouraged to think like a CTO. As I'm a generalist solutions architect, which means that I get to work with multiple domains at a customer. It's not one team that I focus on. I work with the platform. I have to work with data, machine learning. So there is a whole host of teams that we work with, and our goal is to make sure that we are driving towards the business outcomes that our customers are wanting to achieve with the help of technology. So that's at a very high level what I do. I also spend time learning. That is the core essential part of my job, especially at the pace of innovation that is happening these days at AWS and in technology in general. It's important for me to continuously learn and have that mindset. And also, it's important for me to get into the habit of storytelling. And why is that important is really the way we want to convey the messaging from AWS to our customer on how we help them build, how our services help them innovate. So that's super important as well. And then there are days when I get to be in a podcast like this. So yeah, it's fun, a fun role to be in.
I love that. I also am a very curious person. I recently started a Substack blog about Curiosity Log because I made a weekly learning and I make notes where I write, if I see words or phrases or a book quote or if I learn something cool about a country. So I share the passion for learning with you. And you also mentioned storytelling, which is another thing I've been thinking a lot about recently. Can you tell me more about how you see storytelling as impactful, why it's interesting to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super important because if you can weave a story around the message that you want to deliver, it lands well with your customers, right? So, for example, we come up with new services every other day. There are new services coming out of AWS, which is great, but how does it impact the customer? Why those services are something that customers should look at? We recently launched a very important service in the world of agent called Agent Core, and it tries to solve a real world problem for customers, which is to deploy their agents, AI agents, into production. Now, if I just tell them that, hey, look at Agent Core and this is what the service does, it may not resonate well. But you want to weave a story around what are the challenges that customers are facing today when it comes to deploying the agents. Now, there are a lot of POCs happening right now, but are those POCs really adding value? When will they add value is when they go to production. And that's where you want to look at services that allows you to take them to production at scale in a resilient architecture fashion, right? So making sure that you tell a story so that it makes clear sense to your customer and it as to why it matters to them. I think that's important. And that's where I think this art is. Again, I'm not saying that I'm expert at this, but this is something we have to learn because in this role, I have to talk to customers a lot. We also talk to events, large events like reInvent, or there are many other multi-customer events that are happening within AWS, and we are encouraged to participate. And it's important for us to develop this skill because otherwise you won't be a sought-after speaker, if you will, right? In such conferences. So yeah, it's a skill, very important, and something I aspire to learn every day and improve on.
For tech storytelling, there's probably some things you've picked up on that are good. Are there any resources or any formulas that you've seen specifically for telling a story for people in tech that is really useful?
Yeah, I think I have some blogs that I usually listen to. Those are always blogs that I read, and then there are some podcasts that I listen to. So I think the podcasts these days do a very good job. I mean, including yours also. When I listened to some of the podcasts in the previous one that you had, I focus on how the presenter is telling their stories, right? And it really has. There is a method to madness, as they say. And yeah, I think listening to good speakers, in general, it does help both within the organization, outside the organization, and just see how they present, how they carry their conversation. I think that itself is more than enough to learn the skill.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's especially important in tech, especially as tech people, maybe they index harder on skills that are less focused on communication, or at least traditionally it's overgeneralized as that. And that means that it's all the more important because if you can tell a story about why your tech is important to people who don't understand it or know that can make decisions on it, that's very important for your job. And it's a really important skill to have in engineering. So it's a good thing, even if you're talking to your friends, how to tell the story correctly too, like in an engaging way that people don't get lost, Even being a podcast host, my mentor has been listening for a while. He commented 2 years in, you've gotten a lot better. And like, although it's a compliment, it's like, yeah, it takes practice. And I know I still have a long way to go, but it's the communication is a skill to be learned.
And I think just to add to that, I think it's just putting yourself in a spot where you're not comfortable. If you're uncomfortable, you will learn. And I think it's all about practice. It's developing those. It's the rewiring of your brain in a way. So I think the more you put yourself out there, I think the better it is.
Yeah, discomfort and those situations definitely permit for more growth. To backtrack a little, I want to get into AI and ML, which you were talking a little about storytelling, but you have a tagline on your LinkedIn talking about like learning and what you're interested in as well. You mentioned digital transformation. Can you tell me a little bit about, what that means to you?
Yeah, it's a very loaded term, to be honest, but I think for me, it means creating agility in an organization, right? And it's creating agility in both technology and people, right? So it's as much a cultural shift as technological. And some of the major digital transformation projects that I have been part of, the key here is to have an executive buy-in, and it has to be a leadership decision, which acts as a forcing function for organization to change. Right. So as I said, it's all about creating agility, bringing the mindset of innovation within the organization. And I've seen that there is inertia because people are used to working in a specific set of processes, and it's hard for them to change, and it can be painful. I'm not saying it's easy for digital transformation to happen, but once it's done, it really helps bring the speed, the innovation, as I said, in the organization, and the leadership and the people start seeing the results, right? But it's important to set clear definition and boundaries and end goal for each team, so that they know they have the autonomy and independence to work, right? Which doesn't mean that they work in silos. Obviously, it's actually the other way, right? It's all about breaking silos, but it's still important for have teams to own their own set of domain, right? And we talked about microservices and domain-driven design, and all of that plays into this whole transformation journey. So yeah, I think that's the core here, to define the scope, define the boundaries, and make sure that each team owns what they're doing. And then it has to be data-driven. I think digital transformation cannot succeed unless you follow data, right? I'll tell you a story because I've been part of few transformation projects in my past life as well. We were doing this transformation for a large company in a retail space, and one of the things that they decided to do is every services that the team owns has to publish metrics and data, for every API call that goes through it. And what that means is that data will get collected into a centralized location where it can be monitored. And that gives real-time visibility for anybody, for SREs, for leadership, to make sure they are tracking the KPIs, and anything that is going out of the way is immediately flagged. So super important to know that data is at the core of any transformation project, and that really helps in driving the transformation to success. So yeah, I think it's a lot of processes. It's people, tech, process, all of that put together that really makes a transformation project a success. Not all of them are successful, but there are reasons for it. But yeah, I think those are some of the areas where I think customers should focus on when they think about transformation.
So can you give me some other examples of a good case that you saw that's in like how that changed the org or the structure of the team? You mentioned that like adding metrics. I didn't know if that was with the first step in a project, or is it they went back as an organization and thought, okay, we need to add more metrics?
Yeah, I think so. The way I think about this is, as I mentioned earlier, right? It's all about defining your domain, defining the clear boundaries for each team that are participating in the transformation project. So, and then right from get-go, you should know what's important for your service that you're working on? What are the key KPIs that you are wanting to achieve, the SLAs or latency? It could be a latency number and such, right? So all of those needs to be clearly defined and then published. And I think some of the successful transformation projects that I've seen happen is where, like as I mentioned, it has to be a top-down approach. If you don't have an executive buy-in, it will fail. It is bound to fail because there is always an inertia built into an organization, and there are teams that will push back. And unless there is a forcing function, doesn't work. So yeah, I think that those are the things that are super important when you think about a transformation project.
Have you ever seen a transformation project that was successful from the bottom up, as in, say, a software engineer came up with it and was able to get buy-in from executives, and then maybe it was top down? Like, how did that work if you ever saw it?
I have not come across something like this, because typically the project that I've worked on, those are large scale transformation, and that doesn't happen in a silo with one team coming up with ideas. This has to be an approach. It's not a big bang approach, but it still has to be methodically done. And it has to be laid out such that each team member within an organization is aware of what's happening. So I personally haven't come across this situation. Typically, it's always been a case where there is a mandate from the org that they have to make changes and the teams follow.
You spoke earlier about Agentic and telling the story to show that's actually useful. Can you talk more about that, those experiences you've had about Agentic AI, how people are using it?
Yeah. Oh, wow. This is one space which I'm super bullish on, and Agentic AI or Gen AI in general has had a lot of buzz of late. And I think there are some real world problems that I'm seeing solved by this technology. For example, there are traditional AI/ML still out there, right? We can't say that it's going away. But with Gen AI, with LLMs, you are now able to just use the same model for multiple tasks, right? That's game changing, isn't it? Right? You don't need to worry about training multiple models. And this is from a real customer story that I'm working with, and they are now using a same LLM to solve for classification, entity recognition. We're doing some additional tagging work for their data. So it's all done by the same model without them training multiple models. So that's game changing, in my opinion. Then there are some larger implications of this technology, right? Now we are talking about potentially solving for some of the diseases that initially were not, we didn't have answers to. For example, life-threatening diseases like cancer or Alzheimer's, we probably will find some cure for it with the help of Gen AI. Back in India, there are many startups who have embraced this technology, and they are now also working on helping farmers in the agricultural space use this technology to improve their crop yields by better assessing when to irrigate, and how much of a fertilizers to put in a soil. And all of this is done with the help of AI, which I think is the way to use this technology to actually make a lasting impact, right? So those are the areas that I feel where innovation is happening. And the fintech space also is another area where I think there is remarkable progress happening. I can attest to what's happening back in India as well. But yeah, that's another story. We can go on that. But I think the future is bright, and I'm pretty bullish on what this technology entails.
What are you seeing day to day for Agentic AI? How are you advising them?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I think there are two camps here. There are companies who have fully embraced this technology, and they are already starting to look at Gen AI as something that can have potential impact on their business processes. But there are other companies who are relatively new, and that's one thing when we are in this stage, when you realize that not everyone is up to date, and not everyone is keeping tab of what's happening in this space. Right? We are in technology, and we assume that all our customers are also keeping pace, but that's not true.
I don't know if I'm still keeping pace either. There's so much going on.
Right? Exactly. So it's a fallacy and wrong thing for us to assume that customers are doing that. But I think the core challenge here is, you do a POC on GenAI without thinking about what are the real outcomes you're looking to solve. What are the problems you're trying to solve? So if you're doing it just for fun and just because, hey, our board has asked us to do something with GenAI, then there's a problem, right? So I always tell customers and we work with them, first talk about what problems you want to solve, what outcomes you're looking for, what are your success criteria, what does success look like for you? And then think about technology, just like any other technology, it's just a means to an end, right? It's not, don't go tech first, don't try to, don't try to come up with problems just because you have a technology. So you should have a problem and then you think about tech. So, and again, GenAI may not be the only answer. You could just go traditional rule-based machine learning, right? Doesn't have to be a fancy GenAI model for everything. But yeah, I think the core here is if customers not realizing that they're trying to solve a real problem and they're just throwing technology at everything. That to me is a recipe for disaster.
Definitely tell as old as time, though. I mean, people are always trying to use the newest technology just because it's hot. When I was at my old company, Bluecore, I mentioned this a few times on our podcast too. They had this really great motto, which I think they've updated to be somewhat better, and I don't know what it is now, but it's as simple as possible, as powerful as necessary. And I really like that mindset. It's always stuck with me. And I think that's very solutions focused. What do you need to get the job done? Because a lot of times, even as engineers, we also want to play with the fun stuff. And like, what if it's distributed? What if it has cache? And like, it just doesn't always need it. And I know that's sad for the people building it sometimes, but it just doesn't need it.
You're right. And simplicity is the key here, right? You can go crazy. You can build a multi-agent systems. But then you should know that you got to run this in production, and these systems are non-deterministic by design. So you got to be careful. Always start simple. Start with small steps, and then see if you can get to a point A to point B by not making it overly complicated. So I always advocate for simplicity, and then take steps towards adding more if needed. So I think that's the key here.
What would you say that you're seeing people in general struggle with the most?
When it comes to the technology, I think it's the readiness of the people itself and the way the organizations are structured. So, for example, it's a very simple example where a customer is wanting to experiment with GenAI and they want to start working on looking at a model. Let's say on AWS we have Bedrock, which provides access to multiple large language models. Just to get access to those models can sometimes take weeks because of the processes that are defined within the org, right? So that kind of stifles the innovation, the pace at which they can experiment. So those processes, as I mentioned, need to adapt quickly, and they need to change quickly so that people are not feeling constrained because of that. There is also mindset, as I said, people are struggling with. And the other thing, even if you get past all this, the core of this is the data readiness, right? How good the quality of your data is when it comes to using it with GenAI, right? A simple example is, you build a retrieval augmented system, a RAG system, for example, which uses your data for context. Like if you don't have your data ready in a format that a LLM can understand, I mean, you really can't go anywhere with that, right? So I think looking at the data, looking at how ready it is to be consumed by LLMs is, do you have all the right data at the right place? The quality of it, all of that matters a lot when it comes to developing any solution. And then finally, customers are thinking GenAI as something like a magic wand. It's something, it's just plug and play. It's not. It's an iterative process, right? And it takes time. You have to think about this as any other development project, right? You have to think about how you define your test cases and do your test-driven development and all that. And iterate over it a lot so that you get to point A, point B. So I think those are the things. There is a lot to unpack here, but I think companies are now realizing that it's not a silver bullet, and it takes time to adopt with this technology.
Yeah, observability is definitely an area that a lot of people are struggling with, I think, when it comes to agentic and LLMs, because like you said, it's non-deterministic, where as before we kind of had we had a good idea about the input and output we would get at the rate of the request. But now per rate of request, we don't know how many tokens we will ingest, how many tokens we will output based on that. It could be different every time. And also like the query per request could be many for a given request. You can't determine all of these things that you need to be able to somehow measure to know how much memory, how much you need to run, how much it's going to cost. So I'm doing a talk actually on SLOs at SRECon in a couple of weeks in Dublin. And we're talking about this, so it's been on my mind. So it's validating to hear that also other people are struggling with it. So I hope that it will be a beneficial talk.
Right. And the core and the most important thing to note here is that it does require a different set of capabilities to run an agentic system. You mentioned observability, that's core, right? You want to know what the agent is thinking and how it is coming to a conclusion, right? All of that needs to be logged and be available for someone to audit. That's super important. Then there is a need for memory, right? If you're building a chatbot, you need to have the concept of short-term and long-term memories to store that data, to retrieve it later, to generate hyper-personalized experiences for your customers. You need a runtime that, yeah, of course, and latency, right? You need a runtime to run your agents, long-running agents, which can also support session for your customers. So, and then something like a gateway. And I'm talking about all this because those are some of the capabilities that we at AWS are focusing on this year with the launch of this agent core. And these are the problems that we want to solve, where we want to give them the building blocks to develop any agents or agentic systems. And customers don't have to worry about building this. Just focus on your business, your problems that you want to solve, and leave the rest to the cloud provider, right? So that's the idea here. But it's a complex ecosystem that you have to build if you don't use these services.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's nice about being able to use cloud directly. So in your experience, speaking of AWS, what feedback are you getting from your users and clients about what they like about AWS, maybe compared to other providers?
Yeah, so I think another core tenets for us is we don't really obsess over other cloud providers. We obsess about our customers, right, and what they are looking for. We actively seek feedback from customers using AWS, both good and bad. And most of our services, I would say 90% of the development or feature development that happens within AWS is a direct impact of the feedback that we get from our customers. So that's a testament of the fact that, customer obsession, we call it, there are leadership principles here. Those are not just words. I think those are really lived. So another the core differentiator, I would say, is the obsession that we have for customers, right? And the pace at which the innovation is happening now in this space. And I'm right in the midst of it because I directly work with customers who are using this technology, and I work with services teams who are building this. And I can see the urgency and the rate at which the innovation is happening within AWS. I think it's fascinating. It's scary at times because you need to keep up with all this. But it's also exciting as well because I'm so excited about the future, right? Excited about the stuff we are building, and there's more to come. So I think overall, I'd say we are well positioned as a company to provide what customers need to keep up with the pace of change, and we are here to support them.
So you say something that people appreciate about AWS is the customer focus and support that they give.
Yes. Yeah, I think those are, and I say this because I hear it with while working with my own customers, that the kind of effort we put in building trust and building a relationship with our customers is something that typically they don't see with other vendors. I think that's a great feedback that I always seek to receive from my customer, and that's something which keeps me going personally.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, you're at the intersection of it all. It's definitely a great place to be and great timing. You mentioned some of the things people are struggling with. And I want to ask you also, what do you see people succeeding with? So maybe to play off the struggles, those same things that people are struggling with, what do you think differentiates the people that are succeeding with that? The people who have organizations with good mindsets that can rapidly evolve, like at a large scale, can rapidly evolve and implement change. What do you think is different about them?
Yeah, I think it just ties back to the processes and the mindset that organizations has built. You can think about companies like Uber or Airbnb. They call themselves a technology company first, right? They have a technology mindset, and that's the mindset they want to foster. So companies who are tech first and ready to adopt and be willing to change, right? And be willing to change their processes and mindset. I think those are the ones who are the ones who will take advantage of this shift that is happening, right, in technology. So it's clear to me that leadership is important. The leadership has to have the mandate to make rapid decisions, to make sure that their organizations are aligned. If there are any blockers, they should be called out, and it should be a way for people to report any blockers right up the chain. I think that's also important, because as organizations grow, the complexities also build. There are some archaic processes that gets built, and nobody cares, right? Because it's just been there. That doesn't mean that it's right. So it's important for those organizations to quickly address that, and that's where the leadership comes in. And they should be able to they should hear what people at the bottom are saying, and then make those changes that are required. So yeah, I think that really differentiates an organization that does well with the ones who are just laggards in this space.
Yeah, and as you mentioned about things changing so quickly, the speed at which people are developing is faster. The ability to change and adapt is now more than ever really important for getting your products out. So it seems from what you're saying that it's a lot of a people problem. Are people willing to push through and say, okay, let's just get this done and let's, make a new process to streamline this? Are they saying, well, we have to go through here, through there, got to get this approved, and then we got to check on this thing. Yeah. Yeah. I get that. It's a big cultural shift, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the key here. More often than not, I see the people and culture that is the blocker for any innovation. And because technology is always there and it's always going to progress, it's the people and process that matters.
Yeah, that's a good point. From talking to your customers, what are some things that recently maybe surprised you, or a learning experience that you've had recently?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, right, the thing that surprises me, and I think I called this out earlier as well, that not every company is as fast moving or is aware of the changes that are happening in the space of AI or ML that we think, because we are also in the same space. We think that everybody is also catching up. So I think that always surprises me and keeps me grounded, right? I don't want to go with an expectation to a customer that they know it all. I go with a minimal expectation if I'm talking to a customer, and if they are, that's great. Then we just build on it, right? And then there are there's different spectrum where companies are already leapfrogging, and they are adopting at a scale that even it's hard for us to catch up sometimes. They are exploring both cloud, they're exploring our partners, and they don't want to slow down, right? What's good about this space in general is the pace at which these new startups are coming up and the innovation that is coming. Just the other day, I was talking to a partner, which is, and their focus is very niche. So their focus is building inference at scale and at a faster pace, right? So if your company is looking for LLM inference, but with a super low latency, you probably want to talk to this partner, right? So that's just an example of how rapidly this space is evolving, how partners and startups are evolving. And that always surprises me, right? The problems that they're trying to solve with this technology. So yeah, I guess every day is a learning day, and then you learn something new talking to customers. So yeah, that's always fun.
I'm kind of jealous. I feel like that's such a fun job. Do you take a log or kind of a study of all these differences of the people you talk to? I feel like it could be a good study, if you like kind of wrote notes and like asked the same questions, like, oh, how do you deal with this or that? Like you're in a perfect position to have a holistic study about how people are implementing tech.
Yeah. And it's funny though, within the organization also, there could be teams that are ahead of, team A could be ahead of this versus team B.
Or orgs. Orgs are like different companies almost. Yeah.
Exactly. There are different orgs. One org is doing much more in this phase than the other org. And the good thing is we kind of become the glue between these two orgs. And we are able to tell them, hey, go talk to org A. They have already done some cool things now and learn from them. And
isn't that crazy?
Yeah. So, but then I love it because then we are able to be that, the thread, the glue between these two. And then we are able to push the innovation. And now it's like a competition between the org. Like if they do it, then we should also do it. Right? So yeah,
no, I get fun. That. There are fun dynamics in larger companies. Yeah. I think knowledge sharing, doing it well, is still a really big problem that's hard to solve because too much is not productive for engineers' time, not enough, and you have people doing the same things, and that's not very productive for the company. I don't know if you've seen anyone be able to find a good balance. I'm sure like if people aren't aware of orgs that are doing same things, then that's an example of that. Although it's natural to happen really big, like Bloomberg, for instance, like it's so big. Probably that happens a bit too. Yeah, I wonder if you've seen any examples of people who are knowledge sharing well.
Yeah, I think it's again back to the culture of a company. If there is a culture of knowledge sharing, and that's something we at AWS embody, I would say, because we are encouraged to disseminate our knowledge by different ways, by maybe writing a blog, so writing code samples, and then sharing with your teams, and not just within your team, share it with other orgs within AWS, or take it to different geographies, right? Not just North America. So I think it's a cultural thing also, and again, it always takes time. That's something that always takes time to change the culture of a company. That's why being a startup is good, because then you can lay down the rules right from the get-go, versus a big org where things just takes time to spin the wheel.
Yeah, pros and cons of each. Are there any tools that your clients are talking to you about that make you excited?
Well, there are many. The most talked about tools these days are all about developer efficiency, agentic coding tools, cursors and cursors of the world. Or we have Q Developer. AWS launched our own ID called Kiro recently, a stack-driven agentic development tool, or IDE. So those are the ones which I think that's one use case that pretty much all our customers are kind of bought in, that they must leverage these tools so that it just helps improve their efficiencies and help them get product faster out there. It's still hard to track the success of these tools, but there are ways to do it. But yeah, I think those are the tools that I hear a lot. Most of our customers are excited about. Yeah, and there are some open source toolings out there. There are gateways. We talked about Envoy Gateway. There is open source LLM evaluation frameworks. I personally worked with PromptFu as one of the evaluation framework this year pretty heavily. There are many, and I think some of them have higher adoption versus others, but there are plenty of tools out there that customers are looking at.
Yeah, there's so many tools. Yeah, and just for those listening, how we met was from the Envoy AI Gateway, which is a project that I'm working on. It's open source, and you had done a blog on it. So That's when I reached out and was like, hey, are you working on this? It was a really cool experience for us because my manager was saying, oh, wait, someone wrote an AWS blog on it. And it's always cool to, I mean, as you write blogs, you probably have a similar experience. And I used to write blogs, kind of how I got into like content creating for tech, but having people reach out and just tell you that I read your blog or it was helpful, or like connecting through blogs. It was always such a cool experience for me. So it was cool to be on the other side of that. Now I'm reaching out to you as a blog writer.
Yeah, that's always fun. I think I'm a big believer of open source technologies, and I think that's one of the technology that I really am excited about.
Yeah, same. So what do you think are, some of the early misconceptions that people are having about adopting AI?
Well, I think the misconceptions we covered it a bit. The fact that this is a silver bullet, right? I mentioned this earlier, that it's not plug and play. AI adoption requires a dedicated time and effort, and multiple iterations. You have to be. It comes with its own set of challenges. For example, we discuss observability. There are hallucinations, right? You need to put right guardrails in place. You need to ensure that your prompts or your LLMs are giving you the output, because if you change an LLM, it may or may not give you the same accuracy or same kind of results that you're looking for. Having the test-driven development mindset is also important. So I think those are the things that customers are learning the hard way, right? There is this S-curve, right? There is a hype curve, and then there is realization that yes, there is technology, it's going to solve our problems, but it does require some due diligence. So those are some of the learning that I'm seeing customers now figure out as they mature in this journey, adopting Gen AI.
And as you're working with these enterprises to adopt AI, how can you tell me more about the process where you help them design this architecture that they need? How do you balance innovation with resiliency and reliability, keeping it simple but as powerful as necessary? How do you help them with that?
Yeah, I think it depends on you have to work backwards from where customer is, right? And some of the customers are more open to using some of the managed services that we build. I think the whole idea about leveraging managed services is to take that burden off of their shoulders, customer shoulders, and they could focus on building real value. So working backwards from customers are figuring out what their current state looks like, how willing are they to adopt newer technologies, newer services, and then based on that, we kind of build our story, right? At the end, like you said, the goal is to build resilient, scalable systems. And it can be done in many ways. There is no one path to it, right? You can build those. In some cases, it would be more base infra level changes. And other cases, customers are more open to adopting serverless managed services. That it makes it easier for them to make those changes. But at the end of the day, we want to achieve the goals that customer has set for themselves, and the architecture that is support those goals. So yeah, I think listening to customers, working backwards, I think those are critical tenets to achieve success in this role.
How do you decide on the architecture when it comes to a managed solution or a non-managed solution? What I mean by that is like when to use Bedrock versus maybe another solution where they have more control of it, cost-wise as well, latency-wise. How are you making those decisions?
Yeah, it's not just me who would make the decision. There are many factors. So I think it depends on the customer's mindset. It's a build versus buy. So if it's a customer who is build mindset, they want to build everything themselves from scratch and use our infrastructure layer, right, for supporting that. And then there are customers who are buy mindset, and they will be more accepting of some of the managed offerings that we have. Then there is obviously the cost factor that comes into picture, the ROI. Some customers don't have enough resources to build, so they naturally gravitate towards buy. So I guess my point here is it's not just one factor. There are a multitude of factors that comes into making that decision, right? And we always help our customers come up with some ROI calculations, costs and opportunity cost. If you build yourself, this is the time you will spend, and you'll lose that opportunity to actually do meaningful work. So all of that comes into picture. At the end of the day, customers decide what's best for them. Right? So that's how.
So you work with them to you collaborate, you create an architecture. Okay, they go implement it. What is the process like after that? Do you have a feedback loop of how well it did?
There is always scope of improvement, right? So there is, as part of our role, we are required to continue to evaluate the customer workloads, we call it, or customer projects, and make sure that they're following some of the best practices guidelines. The well-architected framework, as AWS calls it. And there is a set of questionnaire. There is a way to audit it. I don't want to call it audit, but there is a way to evaluate the architecture, right? And there is always scope to improve. We may be coming up with newer service that is better fit for the use case than what it was when they built it. So we recommend that, right? And then there are ways to, again, improve the latency, improve the resiliency of that architecture, maybe go multi-region if needed, if your SLAs and SLOs are not met. So the long story short is that, yes, there are mechanisms in place that allows us to go back and review customers' architecture posture and make recommendations, right? So yeah, I think that's an ongoing process that never stops. That's part of our job.
Yeah, so you have a continued relationship with the client after the initial. Another part of your job seems to be the open source, blogging, tech sharing part of it as well. Can you talk a little bit about how AWS sees value in these things?
Yeah, I would. So as I said, I'm a big believer in open source myself. I think it's a force multiplier. It unlocks a massive innovation. And at AWS, we have embraced open source technologies. Like there is technologies like OpenSearch. We have observability tooling like Prometheus, Grafana. The Agentic frameworks like LangChain, Crew AI, LangGraph. All of those are something which we have adopted. The MCP framework that recently came, right? It's been we have adopted that in a big way. We also offer managed versions of some of these open source services so that customers can easily adopt it if needed without worrying about managing day-to-day operations of it. But yeah, I think me personally, an example I'll give you is I was working on a project with this new open source tool called PromptFoo, and we needed a new feature so that the framework supports models that are hosted on SageMaker. Now, if this were to be a service from a cloud vendor, it would have probably taken months to come out, right? But all it required from us is fork that repository, right? Use vibe coding to generate a PR in a week, and within 2 weeks that was live and ready to use. So that's an example of how quickly you can iterate with open source, because it's just unlocks and that just removes all the barriers, right? So obviously you have to have some PR process, review process in place, but it just makes it easy because you make it available to the whole world. So I guess that's my belief. Yeah, there's a lot of potential, and I will continue to focus on open source in the near future.
It's great that you get to experiment with it as part of your daily job. I mean, that's so fun. I'm sure you get to interact with a lot of open source projects and read a lot of getting started docs. And I'm sure that you've noticed that some are easier than others. So what would you say are some that are surprisingly good and easy to get started with? And why do you think that's the case? Maybe compared to others that aren't.
Yeah, I guess the core here is how quickly you can launch a service, right? So as an example, like I'll keep coming back to PromptFoo and then LangGraph. I think LangGraph, LangChain has built an extraordinary documentation out there. It's pretty intuitive with lots of examples. And and then there is getting started guides, right? That can give you a way to get your hands dirty real quick. So some of the best open source projects, I think they spend a lot of time on their documentation and think as someone who is new and doesn't know much about that technology and why we should use that technology, and make it as simple and easy to explain as possible. I think those are the ones who shine the most. And there are others where there is promise, but the documentation kind of becomes overly complicated, and that's where people start losing interest. So
this goes back to the storytelling thing as well. I think when I was learning and writing to learn too, it was I almost wrote it for myself, how I learned, very clear. And it's almost if you're too far removed from that, well, even if you are, being able to put yourself in that mindset of a beginner is really important for, sharing the story of why people should use your open source project. Like, there are probably great open source projects out there that work really well, but just they didn't get a lot of adoption because they couldn't tell the story. So just goes back to exactly what you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Storytelling is the key everywhere.
Yeah. So you mentioned vibe coding. Do you vibe code personally? Like, do you have any? Yeah.
I mean,
what do you use?
I mostly use Q CLI. Of course, I use Q because we have AWS, and AWS offers us this technology, and we could use it for free, obviously, because we are employees. But yeah, I think there is a lot of promise in this. The thing I like about vibe coding is the pace at which I can churn up code samples. Right, it's unbelievable. Right, the other day I was talking to a customer. Did a demo. Yeah, I was talking to a customer. They were talking about a demo, and like 2 hours or 2.5 hours, I was able to build one and just ship it to them. And they were surprised, and they said, "How do you do it?" I said, "Vibe coding." Like, okay, this is serious. So, and that's the power of vibe coding, right? So I love it. I do it pretty much every other day for some project or the other. But and I think that this is game changing. The technology there, right? Just natural language. Use your natural language, and your agents will build your code. So,
have you pushed anything to production or an app store or anything?
Not yet. We have not yet done that. It's mostly been my own personal. When you say production, it's like I push few things in official AWS GitHub repositories, right? So those are still production ready code, but yeah, there is no production workload as such. But I'm hoping your customers use it. Obviously, there are some caveats to using vibe coding because you still need to have all the checks and balances in place. But I believe that will happen eventually. But this is a great way for people to prototype, demo really quick. And you don't have to be a technical person to do this. That's the key.
I mean, I can't believe how in the past year or even less, how much better like AI has gotten at helping me to code, not just Vibe. I mean, what's Vibe code really, but Copilot, and how much better it's gotten at writing tests. Like, usually it would take me, like, there are these reports about how it can take engineers longer to use AI sometimes. And that was so true for me a few months ago. Like, it would just take me longer, but it's not true anymore, I don't think, especially for tests. It's gotten a lot better at tests, at least Gemini. I love using Gemini for tests. And I also use Replit for a personal thing to build a demo. And I was like procrastinating it because I was like, oh, I got to it's just like a whole project I need to start. And I asked ChatGPT to make me a prompt for Replit that's as detailed as possible about everything I need. And it did. And it made me a perfect demo of an app that was like, you can upload pictures, you have a profile, you know what I mean? And
there you go.
Not that long at all.
Yeah, I don't think you're even going to go back to the old ways of working anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I just have a few quick fire questions before we end. So the first one is, one underrated AI tool or library that you love?
I would say it's not underrated. LangChain is fairly popular now, but AWS has come up with its own agent framework called Strands. I think that is still gathering some popularity, but it's very promising, and I would request you viewers to check that out. So yeah, Strands is one framework that I think it's still underrated, but has promise.
Cool, I have to check that out. A book, blog, or thinker who has influenced your architectural thinking?
I'd say Martin Fowler for his Agile Manifesto. That has had a great impact of how I think about architecture and the domain-driven design principles.
Nice. So there's a couple Substacks I've been reading. One is my friend Devanch's on artificial intelligence made simple. And I love the way he breaks things down. I think finding someone that you can especially with everything changing in AI, the digest information that you can read weekly also is a great thing for people looking to try to stay up to date in this space. Next is, what is one misconception about working at AWS?
Okay, that's all about infrastructure, and it's far from it. It's actually about building solutions using the building blocks that we provide. Actually, there's a renewed focus within AWS to build and deploy solutions for customers so that they don't really have to work with infrastructure. So I think that's one of the misconceptions that I hear. It's actually a innovation engine for many startups these days, and it's a lot more than just infrastructure.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think for me, outside looking in, I thought AWS was very regimented, very frugal. I know that's one of the values, or I don't know if value is the right word, but that the company...
The leadership principles, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And not necessarily that collaboration would go against that, but I think for me, what I was surprised is when I went to AWS Day 2, how collaborative everyone is. And you guys seem super collaborative, involved in giving back to the tech community, writing about open source, writing blogs to help people. So finally, what is one last message you would want to share with our listeners that are building the future of cloud and AI?
Well, I'd say stay curious, keep building, learn to unlearn and relearn. I think that's important. Otherwise, if not, then you risk becoming irrelevant. So those are the things that I would say are super important.
So always be learning and evolving your mind. That's a great takeaway. I think.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on.
All right. Thank you, Alexa. This was super fun. Loved it.
Thank you so much for listening to Alexa's Input AI. And if you want to follow along with my new episodes, writing, content, everything I'm building, you can find me at alexagriffith.com, on Substack, on YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you enjoyed this conversation, it would mean a lot if you subscribed, shared this episode with a friend, left a quick rating or a comment to help more people to discover the show and keep these conversations going. Again, I'm really grateful you're here. This podcast started as a side project for me a few years ago, and every listener who reaches out or keeps coming back reminds me exactly why I love doing this, and I love putting so much time into it. I hope this episode gave you something to think about, something to talk about. So always stay curious, stay grounded, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you for your support.